what I wanted to talk about today, and it's maybe a bit of a weird question, but what is accessibility? And it's maybe how I think about accessibility in the kind of broader space of inclusion, and just so I sort of explain what I'm talking about when we go into the discussion. So accessibility is largely about the practice of ensuring there are no barriers that prevent people with disabilities from using websites or applications. It's kind of a subset of inclusion because it very specifically focuses on disability. And there are a few things that are required in order to make stuff accessible. We've got a lot of interest and a lot of talk about assistive technology, which is fantastic. And the assistive technology that's available nowadays is just superb. And it being integrated into platforms is fantastic as well. However, it's more than just that. In order for assistive technology to work effectively, the code, the underlying content needs to work and needs to be written in a way that allows it to work effectively. I'm going to give you an analogy. I don't know if this analogy is going to work, mostly because I'm not really a car person. But imagine your perfect car. There's a picture of a very large 4x4, bright, yellow, shiny truck thing. I have no idea what it is. It's a big car. It's a what? It's a Mercedes, apparently. Okay, thank you. I'm not a car person. I do bikes. So imagine you've got your perfect car. It's a gorgeous car. It's a beautiful car. It's perfect. And then you put in rubbish fuel. You put in contaminated fuel. It's not going to go anywhere. It's not going to do anything. It's just not going to work. So if you think about the car as your assistive technology and the fuel as the code that you're putting into it, did the analogy work? Yes. Oh, cool. Wow, that's remarkable. Right, so here's an example of where code doesn't work, and when it doesn't work, what assistive technology does with it. So this is one example which is about missing alternative text. And if the alternative text is missing from content, so there's a little bit of code there. I'm not going to go code heavy, don't worry. There's a little bit of code there that just, what it will do is it will put an image on the screen. And that's the image, SRC, blah, 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 blah. That'll put an image on the screen. When a screen reader interacts with that, this is what it will hear. Can you press the play button, please?
267,493 JPG image selected. You are currently on an image. To begin interacting with the contents of this image, press Control, Option, Shift, down arrow.
So I don't know if you heard the start of that. It kind of started off with WP 5,267,493. It was reading out the name of the file of the image. It wasn't reading out any alternative text. Now, our colleagues from Google here are doing some amazing things, and in the future, it'll be able to determine what the image is and then give you something, but it may not be what's right for that image. It may miss the context. So what's important is that the author, whoever creates this, has to put in some text that describes the image. I can't remember what this image is. I really probably should have. It was probably a puppy or a kitten, because that's pretty much what the internet runs on. So it's not, the assistive technology is great, but it needs that code to work really well. Another example, and I'm not going to go into the audio. Could you just click off that and... No, don't press play.
WP.
Click anywhere else on the
5,267,493 JPG.
Thank you. And anywhere else.
Select.
If you press the right arrow. Hey, there, thank you. This is just another example of, again, a little bit of code that shows how assistive technology kind of helps. So if you imagine a section of content that's talking about headings, so there's loads and loads of text that talks about headings, and then you split it up with loads of headings, which is a really handy thing to do. It makes content really, really easy to read. It's really useful for people with cognitive and reading disabilities because it structures content and provides a bit more of a sense to it. It's also useful for screen reader users, and I'll show you a little bit about it why. But you need to kind of code it right. You need to put in elements that say heading 1, H1, heading 2, H2, etc., etc. And one of the things that you can do when you get to a screen reader is you can use a little bit of the screen reader functionality, which is called the heading list. and it opens up a dialog box that will show all the headings on the page, and it allows you to do a quick summary of those headings, but also skip to the part of the page that that heading relates to. So you can use it as a navigation device. It's a really, really handy tool. But again, if you haven't got the headings written right, it won't work. So your content needs to be right for your assistive technology to work well. So I'm going to do the next bit, which is a little bit of a cheeky plug for some of the free resources that W3C has worked on before we get onto the chat. So I'll just quickly run through these. But one of the things, and again, coming back to it, nothing about us without us, include disabled people in your processes if you're doing stuff. Accessibility is all about people, and it's relatively straightforward to include disabled people in those processes, either as part of your workforce or participants involved in usability testing of the services that you're creating. We've got a little resource that talks about how to involve users with web projects. That's linked on the slide. Other things. Oh, hang on, I'm on the wrong page. Other things. So you can learn a little bit about the impact of accessibility. I'm sure you're all very, very aware. However, we've got a few videos, which are called perspectives videos, that provide a lot of information around about how little changes can have a huge impact upon the accessibility of a product or service. And it's not just impact for people with disabilities. These can have much broader benefit to all users. So these videos talk about all of that. And again, they're linked there. They're called the Web Accessibility Perspectives videos. The next one, if you're getting interested in the whole thing, is you can do some easy checks. This has just recently been updated. And what these do is they provide you some simple checks that you can do just to check on a few things about accessibility. It's not going to tell you whether or not it passes the regulations or the standards, but it will give you a little bit of information about the sort of whether or not accessibility is addressed in the most basic way. And again, they're linked there. It's only 2 more, so you can wake up in a second. We've got some tips for getting started. So if you're new to accessibility as a designer, a content writer, or a developer, we've got a couple of pages that talk about some quick things that you can do. It explains them, it links through to more content, it provides examples of good and bad. They're quite a useful resource, and they're tips for getting started with accessibility. And the last one, I think, yep. We've also got a little course. So you can find out a lot more about accessibility depending on where you are in your journey and what you're involved in. The course is produced by us, and it's hosted through edX, and it's the Digital Accessibility Foundation's online course. It's a free course. You can pay for a certificate, but you don't need to pay for a certificate if you just want to do the course and get the information, and that's again available all through the website. So that's a quick intro and a quick plug on accessibility and what we're talking about. And what I wanted to do was use some time to speak with the panel just about how the barriers and benefits that good accessibility brings and what that means for people. So if I can, I'm going to start, Jean-Paul, and hand over to you, just with the open question of the sorts of barriers that are faced by poor accessibility and what that means for you or for people that you know of.
Thank you very much. I'm mostly focused on challenge for my personal challenge that I'm getting. I get more challenge on accessibility of using ICT tools. Including laptop, desktop, and phone. Well, I can't forget to start from my childhood. You see games like driving.
Okay,
it need to be used with 2 hands.
Yeah.
It was interesting for me, but unfortunately, I can't use that games. And also, like for instance, picture, like selfie.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, I'm a gentleman, and I need to take picture of myself alone where I want. But unfortunately, maybe the designers like W3C can think on how I can, for the future, I can make my selfie.
Okay.
And other things is a challenge of take screenshots, because it also requires many than two.
So using kind of multiple keys
Phone set.
or multiple touch
And
points.
also some, like for instance in accent, in French accent.
Right, yeah.
It also requests some keys, 3 keys, some accents.
So when you're typing text,
Yeah.
you need to use 3 keys
Yeah.
pressed at the same time.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's why I can't write in French. I always write English in French.
Okay. But your first language is French.
During my writing, my first language become English, because
Okay.
I can't use accent.
That's quite a big change in your in your life.
Thank you.
No, cool. Thank you. Esther, I wondered if I could come to you. So you're more sort of involved in accessibility testing and assessments and usability testing with people with disabilities. I wonder what are sort of common accessibility things that you see in the work that you do?
I am mostly involved in accessibility testing for the website and the mobile applications that are being designed out here. And then especially in Kenya, most of the accessibility issues that you find, they are the minor things. You find like there are images that doesn't have alt text. The image is supposed to be descriptive, but it's not descriptive enough to the people with disability, and that is really a challenge. Then we also have the issue of maybe the controls that are not accessible. Just like he said, he finds it sometimes it's very hard to hold 3 keys down. Then maybe the application that you've made or you've designed, it needs to have a combination of different keys. Yes. And this is because, okay, I wouldn't attribute it so much, I'll maybe say the problem is from developers or designers, but I would say we don't have enough education about the accessibility and what accessibility entails, and also the importance of accessibility to make sure that everything is inclusive to everyone.
Cool. And we spoke earlier as well about colour, I think, and the impact of colour choice and colour contrast. I don't know if you want to say a bit about that.
Yeah, we also have another issue about colors. Yes, when you're developing a website, it needs to be colorful, the colors need to be attracting, you need to have the visual attraction, but you also need to consider, we have a WICA guideline that is contrast minimum. There is a certain minimum ratio that the color should pass, depending whether you use a large text or a regular text. So you need to make sure that the color that you use, it passes the minimum so that it doesn't affect those with low vision. And color does not only affect people with low vision, we also have people who are old age, they don't see the colors clearly. And we also have those people with color blindness. So some of the colors, especially some of the colors like the blue, green, they might be challenging to people. So you need to ensure that when you're designing something that you need it to be accessible, ensure that the colors, they pass the minimum or they are inclusive. Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. And Senzo, if I could come to you. And I know we haven't had an opportunity to talk, but I'm hoping you've come prepared. So again, just what are the sorts of barriers that you experience or that you're aware of people experiencing around about using websites, mobile apps, and accessibility?
Thank you for that. The pleasure for me, just working with persons who have various types of disabilities has given me an opportunity to even learn from them, apart from the disability that I actually have. So looking at those that have visual impairment or are actually blind, the first thing is, if some of the captions on the web application or on a website is there are no closed labels, no closed captions, and so on and so forth, it tends to just go blank, or it reads out a lot, as your presentation has clearly indicated or shown the audience that's present here today as to what tends to happen. Another thing is conflating scripting languages are always a problem, where perhaps you have a Linux with a Java or a Java with a Visual Basic script, which is that of which is being used. And then what the screen reader would do for a person with a visual impairment is just go blank, 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 blank. Meanwhile, there is some form of output that's on screen. And another is when you have these pop-up messages. So you are sitting somewhere and the focus of it is in a text box, then there's a pop-up message, but you don't even know as to what has happened moving forward. So in a sense, it then discourages persons who have visual impairment, and it cuts across to a point where it even impacts learning, e-learning, when you are looking at that from a web-based perspective. Because then if you already know that you have challenges accessing the web, then why should you go and try and learn there? Because you're setting yourself up for failure. But meanwhile, there are just such fantastic opportunities that are web-based in terms of e-learning. And then with the apps as well, web applications. In the country that I am from, we thrive in such, your 60 app, where you can just simply sit at home, and then you can order food. If you're not ordering food, you're purchasing from a supermarket, and then it gets brought over to your doorstep, so you don't have to move much. It's a fantastic idea, but the issue of accessibility within our mobile screen readers as well is just an issue on its own. So what I'm simply trying to say is that though great work has been done, but I feel like those that are visually impaired have not necessarily been extensively considered. And then when you look at those that are maybe perhaps mute or deaf, live transcribe is something that's booming. However, is it compatible to the web is yet another question. Epilepsy. You go into a website and you see flashing images that could easily just trigger an episode to a person who's actually epileptic. And another thing of which we also need to consider when we are creating this, and maybe perhaps from a training center, if that's where you get to access the web, or you are at home, or whatever the case may be, is that at times I may be blind, perhaps because that's what you see, but only to find that I have yet another disability which is invisible. So you could have someone who has dyslexia and also have epilepsy. So if you're curbing one issue, you still have the other issue. So universal models and universal standards are of crucial importance in this case. I'll pause.
And you touched there briefly, Senzo, thank you, on the opportunity and the value that it brings. I don't know if there's any other kind of the benefits that actual good accessibility brings to you in your life and what you do. John Paul, you're nodding. I'm hoping you've got comments.
Thank you. Of course, there are opportunities that the technology is bringing with us. Like, for instance, using technology is why, because I'm here. Without technology, then how can I get this information? And also, the technology is making our work quick. We do our quick job, and this also is enabling, is making able something that we can do with manual things. Yeah, that's the benefit that I can highlight.
I just want to check, can you play any racing games yet? Have we moved to the point where you can play racing games?
Unfortunately, I can't play games, but I play only one game, a serpent. You see the serpent in a cell phone.
Oh, right.
It's the only game that I can play now.
Yeah, so we've still got some work to do on the game side of things.
Yeah.
Excellent. Esther, I don't know if you've got anything to add to that in terms of the benefits and the value that it brings for individuals.
Yeah, let me say for the organization, I'll give the benefits in terms of the organization or as the owner of the website. If you ensure that your website is compliant, you have a chance to reach a wider market. Because we have, in the whole world, approximately 16% of the world population are people living with disability. In Africa alone, we have approximately 3 million people living with disability. Now, if you ensure that your website is accessible, you have a market, you have added another market, a larger market of 3 million people. So it's also a benefit to you when you achieve accessibility. And you also ensure that you lessen the divide, the digital divide that is there, you lessen it.
Yeah, and I think on top of that, there was the talk yesterday about policy and legislation and regulation, and as we kind of expand into global markets, if we've got a standard that people are following, a baseline, even if you've got that, then your access to those markets is much more easily achieved if that's what your organization's interested in. Senzo, we've got about 5-10 minutes left. I don't know if that question of the benefit and the broader benefit, I wonder whether or not you wanted or could expand upon that a little bit. I know you touched on it already.
Yeah, thank you for that. Looking at what we experienced globally due to COVID-19, more and more people were asked to stay at home. But by virtue of that, it then opened up a platform for us to start working from home, which meant that from an application perspective, we needed to understand that application while we were at home. However, we as persons with disabilities tend to have a whole lot of other issues in terms of traveling and transport, to move or to commute from at home to go to work. But now, in this instance, it actually meant that for us as well, we can be considered for us to stay at home and for us to actually work. So with the application and the web application-based type projects or problems, we are now having more accessibilities. We are now learning new words like virtual private networks, where you're just opening just a simple tunnel where you're at home, you just bypass, there you are, you're connected to the server, and you're able to do your work as you are instructed to. Because what we simply don't want to see in the near future is that for us to be considered for jobs that we know very well that we do not qualify for. So when we are looking at web-based applications or we are looking at websites, from an education perspective, now you can go, if you're looking at Cisco, IT Essentials, IOE, the Internet of Things, if you're looking at such programs, you know very well that they are all web-based. You know, it's difficult for you to get that manual, even though we can get it. However, online you have to write about 14 examinations. And if you are sitting at home, you can actually pace yourself in accordance. You can write 1 examination per day, and you can get the qualification, and then before you know it, you're moving on to a workspace. Then you have that transition. However, it's also brings us to a point where we are looking at minimum participations of occupational therapists in this instance, because then we are already orientated, we're at home, all we just simply do is turn on a PC, get connected to data, and then you do your job. At the end of the day, you get your paycheck, and then you are able to support your family. From an entertainment perspective, from a blind perspective, if I may put it to that, you've got your blind Sudokus, you've got your blind escape. We entertain ourselves with regards to that. And then we use these social apps that we tend to use every day, like everyone else, your WhatsApp, your Instagram, and so on and so forth. But currently, for now, it's been very difficult for me to upload some of my videos on TikTok for whatever reason, but yeah, I do tend to get a lot of assistance to that. And if you're looking at some of the interventions of which we're looking at in terms of your social media applications, is now you've got dictation. So as a person with a visual impairment, if you don't feel like typing because it may take too long, and then perhaps the person of which you're talking to may feel this one is typing a long message, but only meanwhile you just wanted to type yes, you know, because on the background on the screen it shows that you're typing and you're still looking for the words. All you just simply do is you use dictation. yes, and then you send, and that's all there is to it, you know. All we just need to do now, I believe, is to look at what company policies entail and so on and so forth, and from an app-based perspective, and then look as to if it falls squarely within those protocols or that framework which is predetermined, and if we can really use them. I'll make a typical example with regards to this. You are stuck, you are at work, the screen reader has gone quiet, and you need to work on the system at work. Instead of you dialing the technician, then you decide, let me rather use an app on my phone like Be My Eyes, something that can read out aloud as to what's going on. Or you want to use Google Lookout. You point it onto the screen and then it reads it out for you. Or you use Be My Eyes and then you dial in, and then someone has a look as to what is going on in your screen. Perhaps that could also increase the risk of espionage, or maybe someone looking at the intellectual property of whatever it is that you are looking at. So and as much as this brings upon independence and for us to be able to do things for ourselves, but we also need to take carefully as to look at what business is saying, and if the risk by virtue of us being there, it does not increase the risk of us being there and the business itself. But in terms of that...
I think we're running low on time, but that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you, Senzo. I think one of the key things I think that I get from that is that sense of independence and capability that ensuring accessibility is there brings, and I think that's probably the most important thing to think about within this. Thank you very much. I think there's a time up sign slowly getting raised. If anybody has any questions, please do feel free to accost any of us. More than happy to chat about this further. Thank you very, very much. We'll work out how to get the slides to you, but they're all available online. Thank you.